Hey guys, how you doing? My name's Lana and today I am bringing you an in-depth guide on the add-on Roots. Now this was requested by one of you guys, a guy by the name of Squish requested that I go into the add-on Roots and all of its intricacies to help you best set it up so that you can farm efficiently for whatever it is that you're going out to get. So this guide is going to start off with the basics, telling you what Roots is and how you can configure it in a simple manner. But then it will go into a little bit more depth of the things that you can do with it that are a little bit more advanced, and also why you might not want to do them. But anyway, we'll get into that. Let's start with the basics. So Roots is an add-on that allows you to create your own route for farming any given node type in the game. Now how it works is it will work in conjunction with another add-on, most commonly GatherMate 2, and it will use the node information on the possible locations for any given node type to then generate a route that you will be able to use to go from one potential spawn point to another in the most direct manner possible, which will greatly increase your efficiency while farming. Now what I like to do to set up routes is I do like to get the GatherMate 2 add-on as well as the GatherMate 2 data add-on, and have these both installed as well before going to set up a route, simply because this will then mean that I have access to all of the potential node spawning point information so that routes can work from essentially a full database of all the possibilities of where I might find any given node that I want to farm. So all three of these add-ons can be found on Twitch, and I highly recommend that you do use your Twitch app on your desktop, assuming that you have it, to go and get these three add-ons before you watch the rest of this guide. So if you want to take a pause and do that right now, go ahead, and I will then go on to continue to explain how you would do the setting up of these add-ons. So to begin with the Roots add-on, what you're going to want to do is log into a character that you want to use for the farming. So if you have me here on my druid, which is my miner and my herbalist, and you want to head to a zone where there is an item that you're interested in potentially farming. So anyone who watched my 5 add-ons video will know that I was looking into farming cobalt, and I didn't really like my route that I had set up down in Grizzly Hills here. I just found that the nodes were quite sparse, and I thought, well, you know what, only one node up is Zoldrak, so I'll try out there, but I'll also use it for making this video. So how we're going to begin, obviously as you can see from your map, you have the data on the node spawn points from GatherMate 2 and GatherMate 2 data. Now obviously in your head you can come up with a vague idea of where you want to go, like from where I am now I could go down here and across and then maybe up a little bit and around like that, and you could do it like that in a very illogical but sort of by the eye kind of way. Or we can use routes. So how we gain access to routes is we simply type /routes in our chat bar and it will open up this page. Now for the very basics, what we want to do is we want to add a new route. This is your start point with everything that you want to do. So it usually finds the zone that you're in when you do this, but if not, just go onto the drop down menu, find where you want to be farming and click it, and then name your route. So I'm going to name this Cobalt because that's what I'm interested in farming. Make sure you click OK, otherwise it doesn't let you click the button at the bottom that we're going to get to later. And then what you want to do is you want to just scroll down here to the GatherMate 2 data section, and you want to just tick the boxes for things that you are interested in. So this is my mining route, so I'm going to take all of the mining options. These herbs I could do have access to, but I'm not all that interested. The treasure chests, I'm not going to be able to see whether they're there or not without actually landing on them. And I'm not really doing archaeology, so just the mining for me today, and I'm going to click create route. Now from there, bit of screen reading for you all, what we can have is, if we look on our map, we now have this line to follow, and if you look, it does seem vaguely like what I'd suggested before when I was just talking you through the map. However, it's a little bit more precise. Now you could just set off at this point and use that as your line to follow, but as you can see from FarmHUD, it's a little bit all over. It's not as bad as the example that we gave in our previous video, but it's not great. You are going to be doing a lot of back and forth that you just don't really need to do, because if you were at this node here, for example, you're going to be able to see these other nodes. You're not going to have to go back and forth as many times as that. So what we need to do is we need to optimize our route. So what we do, we're going to go back onto our routes menu, and we're going to go into the specific route that we just made. Now we're in Zuldrak, and it's called the Cobalt. So this is all of the information and settings we can edit for that one particular route. So if we just go on the information tab, it's telling us how long the route is, 66,055 yards. That's quite a long route given the small size of the zone, with a potential of 280 nodes. So obviously from that you can calculate how efficient any route is. If you just go for the yards divided by nodes, it's going to give you a rough time that you're going to have to travel between nodes. Obviously you could get lucky in where they are, you could get unlucky, but it gives you a bit of a sense of an understanding of what your efficiency level is for the route that you have designed. So ideally what you want to do is you are going to want to make routes where you can get the nodes as high as possible while keeping the yards down. So what we're going to do is we're going to optimize our route with the very basics. So the first thing we're going to want to do is the cluster radius. Like you heard me talking about before, some of those nodes were close enough together you could see two at the same time. What it does by default is it just doesn't cluster them. It's going to take you from one node to the next node. But by clustering them, whatever number you set there, it defaults to 40 because that is the view range on your mini-map to have them locate to each other. Is when you click that cluster, it's now going to put them, if they're close enough like that together, they will now not be separate points to travel to. So as you can see, I think there was about 6 lines here before, there's now only the 4, which is considerably better. But this is still very much back and forth. So what I like to do then is I like to go just one step further. So if we go back into our routes menu, and I like to go for the extra optimization here, and then we simply have to click foreground or background, and this is going to calculate ways in which it feels it can make your route more optimal. Now the only difference between foreground and background is the way in which your computer processes the information, because this process does take a minute or two. And it works as simply as if you don't mind the potential to crash, and if you're on quite a high-end computer and you're in a rush, foreground's going to go quicker. If you don't want to risk these things and you're not on the best PC, like I'm not unfortunately at the moment, if you click background, it's going to do it while you continue to play. You're going to have a lot less problems, but it is going to take a little bit longer. So what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to click the background one here, and then through the magic of editing, I will come back to you when it's completed the route. Okay guys, so as you can see, we are now back and we have had our route optimized. So we cut down from 280 nodes, as it shows you down here, to 121, but we have cut down considerably on the distance that we have to travel. So if we now look at our map, this line here that it's showing us now looks considerably better, doesn't it, for a more optimal route. You can now see the logic behind where it's taking you, and that is more than sufficient for getting you started with the routes add-on on how you can get an efficient farming route for any node that you would like to do. Like I say, I've shown you this for Cobalt or in Zuldrak, but this works for any area in the game. You don't have to be there. If I wanted right now, I could set one up for Wintergrasp to do Saronite, or we could go to the Broken Isles in Suramar to do for Laystone. Don't recommend that one, it's going to take you some time, but you can do it if you want to. Now, when we get onto the more advanced, intricate parts of routes, things become a little bit more, well, they require a little bit more thought. So the main thing that you will see people doing when they're setting up their routes for zones is they will have only a small section of a zone being used for their route. Like for example, people might set up a route here in Zuldrak that only uses this sort of white area that you see up in the northeast of the zone, and they'll completely ignore all of the rest of the zone, so they're only covering about half. Now, in principle, this has a lot of benefits. If most of the nodes are in one area, obviously it makes sense for the sake of the density of the nodes to stay in the area where there are more nodes, and you're going to have a lot less travel. And similarly, if you're in zones, Zuldrak isn't a particularly bad one, but some zones have a lot of caves where you'll find mining nodes that are fiddly and hard to get into. You have to remember where the entrances are, or maybe particularly mountainous regions where you're going to be going up and down a lot. For example, the Jade Forest is terrible for both of those, and is one of the reasons why it's not popularly found for Ghost Iron. You can make exclusions of areas where you don't want to be doing in your route. So you can create a route that is specific to a small part of a zone, and I'll show you how to do that now. So guys, how are you going to set up the taboo areas when you're doing your farm? So places you don't want to go, you're going to go onto taboos here, and similar to before, you're going to name the area, let's just call it south half. It's actually more southwest, but south half of Zuldrak for the sake of the example that we were referring to before. And we're going to create our taboo. Going to go into our route and find our south half taboo, and then we're going to edit the taboo region. Now from here, what we're going to do is we're going to click on the edit button. Sorry, I've just discussed that. So from here we get this lovely little thing on our map where we can configure areas we do not want included in our route. So as you can see, it gives you the option to move these little pins around on the map, and areas within the cross section that you are creating will not be included. So any nodes inside of this pink crosshatch will not be included for your route. So what we want to do is obviously just configure this until we get everything inside of the route that we don't want. That'll do it. That's all of those nodes no longer inside of the area that we want to do. So then what we're going to do is we're going to close our map. We're going to go back into our routes menu where we have now got our area of taboo. We're going to save it there, and then we're going to go onto our routes and find the route that we are using, our Cobalt Zuldrak, and then you'll notice there is a taboo section here also where we're going to just tick the list of the taboos that we've just made and cut off the south half of the region. So now if we go back onto our map, as you can see, it has simply cut out everything that was inside of those pink lines and kept us a route that is nice and clearly kept into the top half. It still remained as optimized as it was previously, but it is now strictly prohibited to staying in the northeast portion of the zone. Now this can be a little bit fiddly to set up, because in areas like this example where it's nice and split in half, that didn't take me too long to do. If you were, say, to go to Storm Peaks and you didn't want to go into this cave here, you'd have to make a taboo for this area. Then you'd have to make another one for this mountainous region if you didn't want to go up and down all of the time, and it can be very fiddly to do. And that can in of itself make it just an inefficient place to farm if there's so many nodes like there is here for the example, but most of them are difficult to get to and hard to access. Then it's just not a good location to be doing your farming anyway. Now, the main reason that we are going to want to avoid using taboos, or certainly be using them very sparingly, is that the respawn of nodes that you are farming is usually zone wide. Now, what I mean by that is that when you mine a node, for example one of these cobalt that we've set up our route for, you are obviously aware that once you've mined it and collected the ore, it disappears. Now, the rate at which it would return is potentially variable by quite a lot of factors, but the main factors that we like to consider here are that every zone has a minimum and maximum for the number of these potential spawn points that will actually exist. So when we set up our route, we saw that there were 280 potential node spawn points for mining in the zone. So what we're going to do is we're going to use those numbers as an example. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to flash some numbers up on the screen here for you, and I'm going to talk you through them. So in our example here in Zuldrak for the cobalt ores, we had 280 potential node spawn points. Now, these spawn points are not all going to have a node in them, as well we all know. What you may not be aware of is that how this respawning of the nodes works is that every zone has a minimum and maximum on its potential for these potential nodes to be active. Now, what this basically means is that if you were to leave a zone and everyone else left the zone and nobody came to touch any of the nodes in it for an extended period of time, eventually you would reach the maximum number of active nodes as they slowly came back over time, which would be a hidden number that varies on what herb or what mining node it is and what zone it's in. But similarly, if everybody went mining in the same location and you were looking to try and compete with other people for mining nodes, you would get to the point where you reached the zone's minimum number of nodes, at which point when the node that was going to take you down beyond the minimum was mined or herbalized, then another one would instantly spawn somewhere in the zone. So I've given you some examples up on the screen here. These are not the numbers for Zuldrak. I just want to make that clear. The potential node spawn points is accurate, but these are just arbitrary minimum and maximums that I have using for this example. Now, in principle, let's say that no one had touched Zuldrak for mining nodes for a whole week. We would be up at the maximum active number of nodes in Zuldrak, which for my example I've put as 50%, or 140 nodes that you could go and mine. Now when you went and started mining them, and you got your 140 nodes, if you started your loop again, there would still be mining nodes available to you because they would have respawned. Now that is because you will have at some point got the node number down to the point where it was at that 56 node minimum active node number that you can see on screen, at which point when you took the node that took it below that number, another one would have instantly spawned. But here's the little bit of a trick. These numbers are zone wide, so if you take one in an area that is not in your taboo area that you've set up from your roots add-on, there is nothing stopping the respawn coming at a node potential spawn point that is out of the area that you have. They could all spawn in the taboo areas that you've set up on your map. Now obviously, the more that you farm without a presence in the taboo area, I should say, by you or anyone else, the more of these random chances of where these nodes will respawn being in your taboo area is going to get higher and higher, because you're constantly re-getting the ones that are spawning in the area that you are farming, and eventually you will simply just fill up the taboo area with nodes without any being available to you. Now, if you have a very small taboo area, this is often not a problem, but you can obviously have very large taboo areas, and then this is going to be a bigger and bigger problem for the bigger of an area that you set up. So what I like to do is I like to operate under the assumption that the minimum number of active nodes is about 20%, because that is what in my experience I've found to be true. And then I will never set up taboo areas for a zone that will cover more than that 20% of the potential node spawn points, at which point you know there's always going to be nodes up for you to get. Although in truth, I don't like setting up these taboo areas whatsoever. I would prefer to simply farm any node that I can in an area where there isn't difficult nodes to achieve the gathering of. Now, that being said, not every node is widely available across multiple zones. Some of them are in these awkward areas, but then again, you can just go into the caves. If it's going to be that difficult, these are going to be quite lucrative and they're not going to be needed in as high supply as more common herb nodes or mining nodes. And as a result, this is why I just don't like setting up taboo areas. But this is a fairly encompassing guide, and I did want to let you guys in on knowing how to do this, but I can't in all honesty say that it is something that I recommend. Now, the two final things that I want to talk about for this video are going to be the two remaining tabs that we haven't discussed in any length so far from the routes menu here when you go onto your specific route, which is going to be edit route manually. The reason we haven't discussed this is simply because I can't in all honesty tell you that I'm familiar with it or that I feel it's a good idea, based purely off the fact that what those words mean is simply that I'm going to take over from the computer in doing the calculations. I'm not a computer, I'm not going to work it out as well as they do. If there are some obvious mistakes or things that a computer just can't derive that you think that you can improve yourself, then feel free to play around with this and see if you can improve it for yourself. But I don't feel as though I'm comfortable telling you how to use this particular section properly, because I don't think it's a section that should be used. On the flip side of that, we do have the line settings. Now this is a very basic part of the add-on, but it is incredibly helpful. So what this is simply that it gives us the settings to configure the line that you see when you are doing your routes. Now, the line itself you may not think is particularly significant, but there are a lot of times in which it can be. Now, on the map that you see here, the line is quite easy to discern. You see me following it now with the cursor, and that's not a problem. But if you play like I do with the smaller version of the map, it becomes considerably more difficult. Or a lot of you will simply be farming from your minimap, and as you can see up in the top corner there, if you were to lose the line at any point, it could be very difficult to find, and it's not always going to be in a colour either that is easy to discern. I've got it set up as this nice pink colour because very few backgrounds in the game are of that shade, so it doesn't often camouflage in. But if you say have a red line and you are in the burning steps, you can easily lose track of that line over, say, a lava pool. So if we just go back onto our routes here, then it's quite easy to see that you have the options to change the line colour here, and we can just change it to whatever we want. So I'm going to make it yellow, nice and vibrant to see up there. I don't see colour particularly well, so that works well for me. And then there's also the ability to change the width of the line, be it on your map, your zone map, or your mini-map. Zone map, for those of you that are unaware, is the little map that you can get up in the bottom corner here, almost like a mini-map, quite helpful in PvP. But yeah, these are simply sliders that you can see up there. The bigger I make it, the wider the line gets on the minimap. Easy as that. And if you don't like any changes you make, you can just reset them back to how you were. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you found it informative and helpful. If you did, please do consider liking or subscribing to the channel. It does help a great deal. And I hope to see you in the next one. Later.